A deafening explosion tore through the crust of Vera 9. Zaya didn't have time to scream. The tremor hit like a god's fist, rupturing the obsidian floor beneath her feet. For half a second, gravity forgot how to behave. A plume of glowing dust and scorched air surged upward as the ground gave way. Then came the fall, hard, silent, endless. Her helmet cracked against rock. Oxygen levels blinked red. And then, black. She woke to the stench of scorched metal and neurotoxic mist clinging to her visor. A jagged cavern yawned around her, lit only by faint pulses of bioluminescence bleeding from the stone. Somewhere above, the team from Horizon Breaker was either dead or trying to contact her, though her comms only spat static. She rolled over, pain spiking down her side. Her suit had sealed the tear, but the bone underneath whispered of fractures. Her oxygen reserves were at 32%. The neurotoxin outside could short out her nervous system within. Minutes if the filters failed. Then she saw it, in the cratered center of the cavern, surrounded by steam and violet blood. Lay a shape she knew even through the fog of disbelief. A Draenic warlord. Its armor was fractured, leaking iridescent plasma. A gauntlet designed to crush bone hung limp. Its breathing was shallow, too shallow for the rage-fueled juggernauts. Known to annihilate human outposts across 3 sectors. But the face, part organic, part exocortical mesh, was unmistakable. K'Tral Zun, the warlord who led the orbital strike on the Terran colony of Delphar's Reach. The same who, in pre-recorded transmissions, declared, "No symbiosis. No surrender, only silence remains." Every fiber in her body screamed, "End him." She reached for her sidearm, only to realize it had shattered in the fall. All she had was the magnetic grip and the core module. Enough to light her path for a few hours, not enough to kill. Not cleanly, anyway. Zaya took one step toward him. Her breath echoed too loudly in her helmet. Kill him, she thought. But the thought wasn't entirely hers. Something rippled at the edge of her mind. Not a word, not a voice. Just a asterisk presence asterisk, hot, electric like the moment before lightning strikes. She froze. Her fingers hovered above the energy core. Another pulse. It wasn't language, it was pain. Pain bleeding from him into her. Not as emotion, but as raw data, burned synapses, corrupted memory shards, fragmented instinct. It surged through the psychic trace in her skull implant like a foreign tide, breaching a failing dam. Her lips parted. "You're broadcasting." The warlord didn't move. Zaya backed away, heart pounding, mind unraveling. That kind of neural resonance wasn't possible. The Draenic were compatible. Human neural pathways weren't supposed to sync with unless, no. That was classified, buried. She dropped to one knee, coughing hard. The neurotoxins were getting through the filters. Her vision doubled. The cavern pulsed like a dying star. She glanced at the warlord again. He was still breathing, still alive. Her logic processor screamed, "Finish him before he finishes you." But another pulse whispered through her neural spine, jagged, wordless, desperate. It wasn't dominance. It was survival. Zaya pulled the energy core from her weapon, rewired it with trembling fingers, and tapped the manual fuse to ignite a soft lumen burst. A pale, amber glow spilled over the jagged stone walls, casting long shadows over them both. She stood over him, weaponless, bleeding, hallucinating, or maybe not. Her voice cracked the silence. "We've both been left behind," she said. "But I'm not dying here, and neither are you." He didn't respond. But the pulses softened, less static, more structure. A pattern forming beneath the chaos. Zaya felt it for the first time not as threat, but as potential. She sat down slowly, painfully, across from the thing that had slaughtered thousands. And for the first time in her life, she chose not to run from the voice in her head. She chose to listen. Zaya had never belonged anywhere, not in the sterile labs of Nova Orbit. not in the barracks of neural warfare academies, and certainly not among the polished ranks of the Horizon Breaker's crew. She was a neurocyte hybrid, a child born of desperation and experiment, bred in the petri dish womb of Silo 13 a biological prison masquerading as a research facility. Her mother had been a volunteer, or at least that was what the files said. The truth had a smell, burnt silicon and medical ammonia. Zaya remembered it well. She had grown up listening to voices that weren't there, whispers threading through her mind. Like stray radio signals, for years they called her defective, unstable. The medtechs tried suppressants, implants, noise-canceling dampeners. Nothing worked, until they realized she wasn't hearing things. She was receiving them, signals from machines, from rogue drones, even from wounded soldiers, whose cortical interfaces had begun to glitch. She didn't just read frequencies, she felt intention. Aggression hummed in power lines, grief radiated from broken servo units. She once shut down a berserk mining rig simply by screaming back into its operating frequency. Not that anyone believed her, she was a walking anomaly. A sensory node wrapped in flesh and trauma, so they turned her into a specialist. Zaya became a strategic neuroengineer assigned to field missions where psychic noise was too thick for AI and drones too predictable. Her brain, once a liability, became a living relay, a bioadaptive system capable of interpreting non-human signals in real time. But war never interested her. She didn't want to build weapons. She wanted answers. What made a species feel? What made them reach across the stars not to conquer, but to connect? The Draenic were the last unsolved enigma. Their warriors didn't speak. Their ships moved like instinct. Their attacks were coordinated without any traceable signal. As if their minds were wired across dimensions. No known tech could explain it. No prisoner had lived long enough to be studied. So Zaya volunteered for the Horizon Breaker expedition, a peaceful front. Or so they said, a science vessel aimed at uncovering the neurological core of Draenic biology. But she had another reason. Her mother's death was recorded as cerebral collapse due to feedback overload. Zaya remembered it differently. 1 minute her mother was fine. The next she was screaming at the walls, bleeding from the ears, trying to claw an invisible presence from her skull. The official explanation: her neural interface had failed. A common defect in neurocyte hybrids. Zaya never believed it. She saw what no one else had noticed: the brief spike on the signal graph, non-human, rhythmic, alien. A Draenic echo. She didn't want revenge, she wanted understanding. Now, trapped in the suffocating chamber beneath Vera 9 crust, with the Warlord Khralzun lying unconscious nearby. The memories returned like ghosts pried loose by the toxic air. She sat against the cavern wall, knees drawn to her chest, watching the flickering pulse of the Warlord's chest plate. Violet light seeped through fractured armor. His exobone mesh twitched with residual currents, each one tickling the edge of her perception. Even in sleep, he was broadcasting. She could feel it, not words, not even images, but something deeper, subdermal signals, emotional barbs. Fragments of instinct sharpened by evolution. He was bleeding his essence into the cave like a dying beacon. And Zaya, of all people, could hear it. She thought of the others, her crewmates on Horizon Breaker the ones who had laughed at her nervous tics, her episodes. The way she would flinch at humming machinery, or go silent in rooms thick with digital chatter. They thought she was afraid. She wasn't afraid, she was listening. Zaya pulled her knees tighter, pressing her forehead against the inside of her visor. Her oxygen was still draining. The filters were holding for now, but she knew how neurotoxin seeped. It wasn't the lungs that failed first, it was the mind. Hallucinations, emotional distortion, echo loops, a perfect environment for her to lose herself in his signal. I'm not my mother asterisk, she told herself, but part of her wasn't so sure. The truth was, Zaya could already feel the warlord's pain latching onto her like a parasite. She didn't need language to know what he was reliving. The way his signal flared and collapsed told her everything. Rage, loss, exile, it mirrored her own, her head throbbed. She clenched her fists, digging nails into the pressure seals of her gloves. This wasn't a moment of peace, it was a convergence. The daughter of a woman destroyed by alien noise, and the warlord of a species whose entire existence defied linguistic logic. One created by accident, the other built for destruction. Now trapped together beneath the skin of a dying planet. Her body trembled not from fear but from recognition. This was more than coincidence, this was a junction. Zaya looked at K'Tralzun again. His face, half covered in cracked bioarmor, revealed a glimpse of mottled flesh, gray-blue. Tight over a brutal jaw, his breath rasped through a shattered rebreather, each exhale tinged with faint radiation. He should have died hours ago, but he hadn't, neither had she. She reached out a hand slowly, experimentally, not to touch but to feel. The moment her fingers hovered over his core, a static jolt raced up her spine. Her mind lit up like a city grid, neurons firing, heat rising behind her eyes. She gasped, her vision blurred, not with darkness but with memory asterisk. His flashes of war, firestorms over oceans, a child's scream cut short. A betrayal, a choice, an exile. Zaya jerked her hand back. They were bonded, whether she wanted it or not. Something deeper than proximity was linking them now. She could run or she could use it, not as a weapon, but as a bridge. And for the first time since the day her mother collapsed, Zaya chose not to close her mind. She chose to stay open, to the noise, to the pain, to the signal that no one else could hear, but she alone might understand. Zaya kept her distance at first. Even unconscious, K'Tralzun exuded menace. His armor twitched with residual current, each pulse brushing her senses like a distant threat. She studied him in the shifting amber light cast by the improvised core lamp. Breathing, yes, but shallow, muscles twitching under pressure. There was a wound on his side, deep, jagged, leaking violet ichor that sizzled when it touched the cavern floor. She had to know how close he was to death. If he died here, maybe the resonance would die with him. Or maybe it would tear through her unchecked. She approached slowly, each step echoing in the silence. Her gloves brushed the torn edges of the exomesh near his wound. Beneath it, strange tissue writhed like muscle and wire fused together. She extended 2 fingers to check for pulse synchronization, and the world shattered. Not outward, inward. Her mind was pulled, no asterisk yanked into a storm of image and sensation. Not dreams, not memories, something older, more primal. A data scream that pierced her skull and bypassed every firewall in her neural implants. Flashes, a planet crumbling under crimson fire, the sound of millions crying through bones instead of mouths. Children made of steel and ash, burning in zero gravity. Screams without sound, soldiers reduced to blood and heat. The sky torn by silent missiles, and then her, a human form reflected in his memory. Her face, or someone like her, standing over scorched ground, holding a rifle too large for her frame. Her eyes empty, the connection severed violently. Zaya fell backward, gasping, chest heaving as the cavern returned. Her hands trembled, a trail of blood leaked from her nose. She had touched his memory, not through data, not through language. Through asterisk instinct asterisk. He stirred. K'Tralzun's head tilted slightly, mechanical vertebrae clicking. His eyes opened, one human-like, dark and narrow. The other, a pulsing hexagonal lens, recalibrated with a soft mechanical chirp. But he didn't speak, not with sound. The images came first, disjointed, jagged. Not like the earlier storm, this was focused, intentional. A forest of thorns, chains snapping, a wound splitting open. Then a face asterisk, hers, warped by distrust. He was trying to read her. Communicate, she stepped back, hands raised. Don't. Another burst, asterisk, not aggressive, just desperate. He projected confusion, recognition, pain. And somewhere buried beneath the venom, something strange. Regret, asterisk, not full-formed, not spoken, but it pulsed like a bruise just under the skin. She didn't answer, not yet. They spent the next few hours in silence. Zaya moved methodically through her survival checklist, her body moving on muscle memory while her mind struggled to settle. Her suit's oxygen was running out, and the cavern's neurotoxic atmosphere had already begun to corrode her external seals. She located a collapsed ventilation shaft, reassembled a basic gas filtration unit using fragments of her broken rifle, and melted heat coils. It wasn't perfect, but it would delay her death by hours, maybe more. She shared water, rationed light, reinforced a perimeter with fragments of metal and mineral she could magnetize. And K'Tralzun watched. He never asked, never spoke. But each time she got close, his mind pressed against hers like a hand against frosted glass. He didn't lash out, not physically. He didn't try to kill her. He tested asterisk her, small psychic pulses, emotional frequencies. Soft at first, curious, uncertain, but over time more forceful, more invasive. He was trying to asterisk break in asterisk. Zaya pushed back carefully. She had trained for this, back when she was little more than an experiment in a chair, hooked up to synthetic brains that pulsed with rage and fear. She learned to redirect hostile frequencies, to asterisk bend, them like water around her mind's edges. Most people went mad. She de-adapted, but this wasn't a drone. This was a warlord, a being whose instincts had been sharpened into weapons. Twice she almost lost control. Once she found herself gripping her own throat. Another time, her fingers reached instinctively for a non-existent weapon. Compelled by an image he projected, her mother screaming beneath surgical lights. She cut the connection then, violently, roaring in defiance. "You don't own my memories," K'Tralzun recoiled. For a moment something in his face cracked. A flicker, not fear, recognition. After that he backed off. The mind assaults became less frequent, shorter, controlled. They lived in an uneasy silence. She patched leaks. He stabilized the wall above the filtration unit. They shared oxygen space, but never direct words. Instead, they dreamed. Zaya began to notice the shift first in sleep. Her dreams, once fragmented flashes of trauma, became asterisk-linked. Shared visions, scenes that didn't belong to her. In one, she ran down a corridor of pure light, chased by echoes of her own voice. In another, she stood in a burned field, watching a child figure disintegrate, pixel by pixel, as a silver ship screamed overhead. And one night she saw herself, not as she was, but twice over. Once running away from a blinding azure glow, sobbing. And once more turning back, reaching down, to a creature writhing on the ground. Bleeding, dying, her fingers reached for its claw. Not in fear, in mercy. She woke gasping, heart slamming, sweat soaked into her undersuit. Across the chamber, K'Tralzun stirred, and for the first time his eye met hers and didn't flare with hostility. He blinked slowly. She nodded once. They were not allies. Not yet, but something had begun. A current, a pulse beneath the skin neither of them could deny. K'Tralzun was healing faster than Zaya expected. The biomtal lattice that covered half his chest had begun knitting itself, pulling scorched fragments back into order like a living puzzle. The wound in his side no longer hissed. The violet ichor had darkened, thickened. The glow in his artificial eye no longer flickered, it tracked. He was awake, not just physically, psychically. She felt it in the cavern's air, which vibrated faintly with his presence, stronger, sharper, colder. He sat upright, slow but deliberate, and locked eyes with her. "You are a tool," he said, not aloud but as a direct pulse of thought. "Why didn't you kill me?" Zaya, sitting near the cracked filtration unit, didn't look away. "Because I don't believe in your species," she said. "And I don't believe in mine either." The silence between them sharpened. "But I believe pain," she added. "Pain is universal. And you're bleeding it everywhere." K'Tralzun tilted his head. "Pain is not a reason, pain is fuel." "It used to be," she said, almost quietly. "But pain without understanding is just a weapon waiting to be reused." He didn't reply, but she saw the flicker in his mind. A disturbance, not confusion, conflict, a shudder in the otherwise impenetrable wall of purpose that surrounded his thoughts. Then the earth moved. A tremor tore through the rock shelf above them with a grinding, apocalyptic groan. The cavern split. Zaya was on her feet in a second, but the floor heaved like a living creature. Her legs buckled. Above, molten fissures cracked open. Red-hot plasma surged through natural veins in the stone. The shelter collapsed. She lunged for her bag and was flung down a slope of shattered obsidian. A deafening crash, then silence. She came to with dust in her throat and pain in every joint. The filtration system was gone. The overhead passage had sealed. She was alone, no. K'Tralzun was there, a silhouette against the amber fire of the molten channel now exposed beside them. He stood barely limping, one arm bloodied. His shadow stretched over her, and in it she saw him hesitate. Zaya tried to push herself up, but her footing slipped. The lip of the ledge cracked beneath her. Below, a slow river of glowing plasma. One heartbeat, then another. Her hand slipped. She started to fall. And something caught her. A massive clawed hand, metal and muscle, wrapped around her wrist and pulled. Her body jolted upward. She crashed against the wall, gasping, clutching his arm. The heat singed her skin even through the suit. He didn't speak. Didn't think words. Just raw emotion, rage, confusion, refusal. Not directed at her, but at himself. He had saved her. Not as an instinct, as a choice. He released her the second she was on solid ground. Turned away, as if ashamed. Zaya watched him retreat to the wall. She saw how tightly his fists clenched, the way his breathing turned erratic. A beast trying to break its own leash. She couldn't hold back anymore. If they were going to survive, truly survive, she needed to understand him, and not just through scraps of emotion. She had to enter him, and to do that she had to risk everything. She knelt down and reached out, mentally, not with words but with the open channel of her gift. She didn't press, she didn't force. She simply whispered in thought, "Show me." At first there was nothing, then a deluge. It hit like a tidal wave, not just image but immersion. Zaya's body remained kneeling, but her mind was pulled into the lattice of his memory. She stood on burning ground, skies torn in half, ships descending with human insignias, raining fire across the violet plains of a planet, *Draenic 4 *. She saw him, K'Tralzun, not a warlord, not a weapon, but a father, holding a child in his arms, a daughter with scaled skin and eyes too wide for her face. She laughed when he tossed her into the air. That laugh never came again. The strike was surgical. Earth forces called it a cleansing protocol. They dropped anti-biological flares directly on civilian zones, suspected of harboring hive transmitters. Her body, so small, was caught in the blast radius. She burned. He screamed, but no sound came, only fire, and after that, only *hate*. His grief had no name in any human tongue. It was deeper than language, deeper than war. He offered his mind, his body, his memories to the Draenic Imperium in exchange for one thing. Erase everything human asterisk. He became a blade, a storm. A myth of vengeance. Zaya was ripped from the memory as if gasping up from drowning. She collapsed, shaking, bile rising in her throat. Ralzun hadn't moved. She turned toward him, her voice rasping through cracked lips. "Your daughter, I saw her." He didn't look at her. But something in his breathing changed. "Her name was Circa," he said, aloud this time in a voice rough as granite breaking. Zaya swallowed. "I'm sorry," his eye flashed. "Don't be." "She is what made me pure." "No," she said, "she is what broke you. You never healed. You turned your grief into genocide." He turned to her now fully, and she saw in that face of fused flesh and metal the ghost of a father still burning in the ashes of a monster. "I'm not here to forgive you," she said, "and I can't undo what's been done. But killing me won't bring her back, and killing more won't stop the echo." He stared at her for a long time. Then, without a word, he raised his left arm. With a single motion, he unsheathed a narrow blade from his forearm and drew it across the outer layer of his wrist, deep enough to let blood flow freely. Zaya flinched. Ralzun reached out. His violet blood, thick and shimmering, traced a line down his fingers until it touched her temple. The heat was immediate, not burning asterisk alive asterisk. The blood pulsed, and with it came a sudden, overwhelming silence. Not emptiness, a shared stillness. In Draenic ritual the act was sacred, asterisk Kytharvoln asterisk the communion of loss. Only once in a warrior's life, a permanent psychic link formed through pain. Zaya gasped, her vision split then realigned, and then they were no longer two minds. Not exactly, a thread now tied them together, not alliance. Not peace, but understanding asterisk, and it would change everything. The message arrived in fragments, dripping through static and interference like blood from a wound too deep to clot. Zaya decoded it slowly, trembling fingers working across the emergency uplink. She had jury-rigged from Ralzun's cracked neural node and a piece of her helmet's comm array. The signal wasn't meant for survivors. It was an obituary. A broadcast from Earth's orbital command. Horizon breaker, presumed compromised. Protocol V9 initiated. All biosynthetic anomalies within Draenic 9 quadrant are to be neutralized. Asset cleansing underway via atmospheric purge satellites. No survivors anticipated. Her eyes stopped reading. Her team was gone, all of them. Juno, Reth, Mevi, the xenobiologists, the peace negotiators, the data archivists. Every person who had signed up for exploration, not conquest. Vaporized in a single blink of logic from someone 1,000 kilometers above the surface. No one had even tried to reach them. Behind her, she felt the air thicken. Not from heat, from him. Ralzun hadn't moved. But the psychic current that pulsed from his presence shifted, from stillness to electricity. His body stiffened. His eye glowed brighter, and the metal veins along his arms shimmered. He had seen it too, the message, the betrayal, the confirmation that Earth had no intention of coexistence. "You see now," his voice rippled into her mind, "there is no peace. Only delay. You were bait. They feared what we might become. So they burned everything." Zaya stepped back, instinct screaming. The mental link between them burned like an open wire. His emotions surged faster than she could shield. Rage. Loss. Wrath curling in spirals around vengeance like a storm folding in on itself. He looked up, and his thoughts struck her like a blade of lightning. "I will awaken them." Zaya's breath hitched. "Who?" she whispered, but already knew the answer. The deep armada, the hidden fleet, entombed beneath Vera 9 crust, Draenic warships buried in the mantle, shielded, waiting. All connected to Ralzun's genetic code. His will was the key. No, Zaya said aloud, shaking her head. You don't need to do this. He didn't speak. He simply stepped forward, his fingers twitching in sequence, initiating a neural code through the comlattice carved into his bones, an ancient interface. An awakening. Zaya launched herself at him, not physically, mentally. The mind link erupted. Their consciousnesses clashed with such violence that her vision fractured. She fell through the layers of his psyche, and he into hers. Not a battle of fists, but of memory. Zaya saw planets he had scorched, cities he had erased, always framed in his grief. A retribution he never admitted was hollow. She hurled resistance through her own scars, images of her mother, screaming as electrodes overloaded her neural implants. Humans, her own species, had done that because she was too sensitive, too connected. She had lived in exile in her own skin. Just like him, I know what betrayal feels like, she shouted, voice choked with psychic strain. I know what it means to be turned into a weapon, but if you launch that fleet, you become what they fear. His thoughts cut through hers like fire. Fear is survival. Fear keeps them from coming back. No, her voice cracked. Fear becomes them, be more than them. A surge of grief hit her, sudden, crippling. The memory of a child, his child, burning on Draenic 4. A planet scorched by Earth's ignorance. A war begun not with violence, but with fear of understanding. Zaya staggered, clutched her head. You think killing them will bring her back, she whispered. You think turning this world to ash will make the pain stop? He didn't answer. He couldn't. She pushed deeper, past his defenses, past the rage, to the core of his mind where something still grieved. The part of him that remembered holding Circa in the quiet hours of pre-dawn, before the drums of war began. And in exchange, she opened her own mind. Let him see her asterisk. A little girl, curled beneath a flickering fluorescent light in Silo 13. Hands clamped over her ears, as voices not her own screamed through her skull. A mother trying to silence the storm with lullabies, until one day, the system silenced the mother instead. Look at me, she said. They killed her because they feared what I could hear. I wanted vengeance. I dreamed of burning the labs. But I didn't, because if I had, I would have become them. She stepped closer, trembling. You can stop this. Right here, right now. If you do, then she lives. Not in blood, not in vengeance, but in your choice. Zun stood before the interface stone, where the command lattice for the fleet flickered, awakened by his biosignature. His arm hovered over it, one gesture, one thought. A single mental pulse would awaken the deep armada. Zaya reached him slowly. He didn't look at her, but she saw his hand. It was shaking. Silence descended like snow. In that stillness, neither spoke. Only the hum of buried warships whispered below, waiting. Zaya closed her eyes, and so did he. A tremor ran through the chamber, not from the planet, but from the link between them. The command lattice dimmed. Zun lowered his arm. He turned to her, not as a warlord, not as a weapon, but as something lost trying to remember how to be whole. The moment passed, and the world for once did not burn. Zun's hand hovered over the command lattice one last time, then curled into a fist. The interface stone dimmed. Beneath their feet, the psychic signal meant to awaken the deep armada stuttered, then died. Zaya stood beside him, her breath shallow but steady. The neural link between them still shimmered like a living wire, dormant now, but not broken. Zun turned to her. His thoughts were quieter now. Not empty, but at peace. What now? She asked, barely above a whisper. He raised his arm, not to strike, not to command, but to transmit. Not to ships, not to war, to life. Zun extended his consciousness. A web of thought unfurling like smoke across the psychic plane. Zaya joined him, reaching outward with her own frequencies, amplifying and shaping the signal. Two minds once forged in blood, now linked in harmony. Together, they cast the message deep into the chasms of Vera 9, and farther still. Across the quiet networks where the last of the Draenic hid. Not words, but a truth. War is over, not by defeat. Not by victory, but by choice. You are no longer soldiers. You are survivors, live. The resonance pulsed like a heartbeat across the buried colonies, the hibernating nodes. The ancient cores hidden beneath rubble and ice. There was no reply. But the silence was different this time. It was listening. Above, Earth's fleet moved into final position. The Asterisk Seraphim-class carrier, resolute, had locked trajectory on Drainic's moon. Orbital Command had approved Operation Clean Sky, designed to eliminate any possibility of alien resurgence. 3 kinetic rods, each the size of a skyscraper, would fall from orbit, impacting the crust with the force of extinction. No second warnings, no negotiation, just fire from the sky. Zaya felt the shockwave coming, not the physical one, but the intent, building like a scream in the metal bones of the planet. Her hands trembled as she crawled to the wreckage of her earlier uplink system, broken scraps of Draenic interface. Her cracked neuropatch, and a half-dead signal converter salvaged from her suit. It wasn't enough to send a full override, but it was enough to redirect. She stared at the neural relay and closed her eyes. Just one angle, she murmured, just enough. K'Tralzun moved beside her. You'll burn yourself out, he said, not with words, but through the faint hum of concern laced into their shared link. Zaya smiled through the pain. Wouldn't be the first time. She pressed her palm to the relay and pushed. A feedback surge roared through her brain. Her consciousness split into data, flung outward like light bending through a collapsing star. She entered the navigational field of the Terran strike array, just long enough to nudge a targeting marker 5 degrees off-center. The rods fell, but they struck ocean. Drainic's moon trembled. The sea turned to steam, but the crust held. The cities beneath it remained. Zaya collapsed. She woke in silence, sterile air, a steady heartbeat monitor. The scent of disinfectant laced with recycled oxygen. Her first thought, am I dead? Her second, where is he? Then she saw the shape beside her cot. K'Tralzun, armored but unarmed, standing not as a warlord but as a man caught in history's wake. They had pulled her from the caverns. Medical personnel had sedated her. She had been unconscious for almost 36 hours. Long enough for politics to catch up. An interstellar tribunal was already underway. K'Tralzun had surrendered, no resistance, no terms. He had walked onto the extraction ship and spoken only one sentence, I will answer. The court demanded death, not just for war crimes, but to set an example. They called him a butcher, a ghost of genocide. Zaya stood before them. Her uniform torn, her body still weak, but her voice clear. If I'd killed him in that cavern, she said, maybe you would call me a hero. Maybe humanity would sleep easier. She turned to the silent assembly. But we would not be human anymore. A murmur swept the tribunal. Zaya raised her hand. He was the enemy, but he made a choice no one on this council ever dared make. He stopped, a pause. Her final words were soft but unshakable. I'm not asking for his freedom. I'm asking you to recognize what happens when someone, anyone, chooses peace over legacy. The council deliberated. Hours turned to days. In the end, they compromised. Execution was off the table, but K'Tralzun would be exiled to a neutral sector beyond mapped star lanes. No communication, no return. His final words to Zaya before boarding the ship, you carry more fire than any weapon I've ever known. Her reply, I carry the silence you gave me. Zaya refused all honors. The medals, the parades, the titles. She walked away from it all, took a transport ship to a fringe system, and settled on a moon with no name, where the sky shimmered with stars untouched by war. She built no monument, made no declarations, but some nights, when the wind passed over the fields and the stars pulsed in patterns only she could hear, she reached out with her mind. And somewhere, faint but real, a heartbeat echoed back. This was never a story about victory through force. There were no triumphant battle hymns, no shining fleets returning to cheers, no final strike that turned war into history. What happened beneath the surface of Vera 9 was quieter, stranger, more difficult, and far more important. It was a victory not of weapons but of will. Zaya was never a hero in the way history prefers. She didn't wield power. She didn't lead armies. She didn't win a war. What she did was far rarer. She chose to listen, to reach across the divide between species, not with arrogance, not with fear, but with an open mind and an unflinching heart. She dared to sit in silence beside the thing she was taught to hate. She didn't try to change Cavern or forgive him or fix him. She simply chose not to become his mirror, and that changed everything. Zaya didn't stand for humanity. She stood with an asterisk it and against asterisk it when it turned its fear into violence. Her own people tried to erase her mind before the war even began, terrified of what she could feel. They saw empathy as instability. They treated connection like infection. But in the crucible of war, it was empathy that survived. Cavern, too, was never truly a monster. He was a father who had lost a child, a commander who had lost his purpose, a soul who had buried his grief in conquest, convinced that pain gave him clarity. It didn't, it only made him hollow. And yet, when given the chance to unleash everything he had become, he hesitated. He stepped back. He remembered. That hesitation was the moment the war ended, not when treaties were signed or bombs silenced, but when someone could have burned the world and chose not to. This story does not say that forgiveness is easy or even always possible. There are wounds that do not close, losses that cannot be undone. There are memories that will never stop echoing, but it does say this: vengeance does not guarantee survival. And survival without humanity is just another form of extinction. Zaya walked away from her people not because she hated them, but because she refused to become what they were willing to become to feel safe. She didn't ask for medals. She didn't want legacy. She wanted silence, a silence earned through understanding, a silence chosen. And Cavern in the end gave that to her, not as a warlord, not as a prisoner, but as a man who had remembered what it meant to lose something precious, and chose not to take it from someone else again. We will never know what would have happened if they had fought, because they didn't, and that in itself is the point. So if you are reading this, or hearing this, or living in the world they left behind, remember this. Don't ask how many enemies technology can destroy. Don't count the megatons, the algorithms, the precision kills, or the orbital strikes. Instead, ask this: can you survive without becoming the very thing you fear most? Can you live with the choice not to pull the trigger? Can you sit across from what once hunted you and see, not the claws, but the wound beneath them? The universe is vast, cruel, indifferent. But now and then, in the quiet between wars, something greater emerges. Not peace, not progress, but compassion. That is the true test of any species, not whether it can fight or win or rule, but whether it can stop whether it can look into the eyes of something different and not see a threat, but a reflection. Zaya did, so did Cavern, and in doing so they reminded us, the future does not belong to those who burn brightest. It belongs to those who choose not to burn at all.